And we're live. Welcome in hardcore Penn State football. We are buying some time as the Nittany Lions are on their bye week. We have Joe Smeltzer from Nittany Sports Now joining us, and he'll be our guest picker for this week. Gonna talk some latest news as far as coordinators, as both offensive and defensive coordinator met with the media this week, as well as some injury updates from the Northwestern game. All that and more coming up in just 1 second. Welcome into Hardcore Penn State Football. I'm Cory Lestochi. With me, as always, the great Shawn Kane. How are you doing today, Shawn?
Not too bad, Cory. Happy hump day. No game this week, but still have a lot to talk about. How are you today? You are muted, sir.
Hey, Joe, can you cut your video?
Yeah. Yeah, we're doing it on the laptop now. I guess the video's still not good.
Sorry about that. We are back. Some technical difficulties there. Shawn, I didn't even hear what you said. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm good. I just said happy hump day, as always. No game this week, but still have a lot going on with the team. And yeah, how are you today, Cory?
I'm fantastic.
You're looking good today.
Thank you. I tried my best. No video, but we do have audio. Joe, how are you doing today, man? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm doing pretty good. Had an interesting adventure trying to get on here by doing Skype, but I got it. And yeah, things are going pretty well. So
fantastic. Wanted to give a shout out to Zach P, who's here on YouTube. Welcome in, Zach. Joe, Penn State is 5-0 at this point. Got through Northwestern 41-13. What were your thoughts specifically about the Northwestern game and how Penn State looked?
It was nothing too surprising, I don't think. We coming into the game, I think we all were curious about if Penn State would start slow because it was on the road. 11 a.m. kick Central Time. We're wondering kind of what the first half would bring. And for a Penn State fan, I think the first half went probably about as badly as the worst case scenarios that were envisioned, being down 10-3 in the second quarter, only tied at 10 at the halftime. But I think we all expected at some point, whether it was early on or later in the game, Penn State would find its legs. And while I'd argue the offense never fully found its legs, I think the team overall was much better in the second half. And that's indicated by the fact that Penn State outscored Northwestern 31-3 in the last 30 minutes. But yeah, it was much like the Illinois game 2 weeks prior. It was hardly a statement emphatic type win, even though the score was lopsided. But there's a lot of I don't know if there's a lot of question marks since Penn State's 5-0, number 6 in the country. The defense is great, have beaten everybody by double digits, but at the same time, there's definitely a few areas on this team that need to be improved by the Ohio State game, October 21st. So,
yeah, no, for sure. That's kind of what most, I think, the feelings have been so far among Penn State fans. You had a chance to sit down on some Zoom calls with offensive coordinator Mike Yurcich, defensive coordinator Manny Diaz, and strength and conditioning coach Chuck Losey. Let's start with the offense, since that's kind of where a lot of the Penn State fans' minds is at right now. What did Coach Yurcich have to say? I know he talked about wanting to be more explosive, but what were your takeaways?
Yeah, it was an interesting conversation, I'd say. I think something that stuck out to me was that Mike Yurcich mentioned that the communication between Drew Aller and the receivers isn't really there yet through 5 games. Obviously missing Trey Wallace hasn't helped with that. It looked like Wallace was for sure, and he probably still is for sure, the team's number 2 receiver after that solid performance against West Virginia week 1. But he played against Delaware, but ever since then, Wallace hasn't really had a week where he wasn't limited or just not playing at all. He got a decent amount of reps against Iowa, but none against Northwestern. Franklin said he'd be good to go for UMass, so that'll be a good weapon for Penn State to get back in its offense. But yeah, that's kind of the thing that stuck out to me, and that's really was the root of a lot of the offense's problems, was that the connection between Drew Aller and then pretty much any receiver not named Keandre Lambert-Smith wasn't there Saturday. And I think the only game we can look back, arguably Iowa, because Aller did throw 4 touchdown passes, but the one game where we left thinking, okay, this passing game could really be something, these receivers could really be solid, was against West Virginia, and that was the game where Trey Wallace kind of broke out a little bit. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think Wallace is a big part of this offense, and without him, there's really not a defined number 2 receiver behind Keandre Lambert-Smith.
Yeah, Trey Wallace, even though he's really only played in 1 game, is still Penn State's second leading receiver, which kind of speaks to that exact fact that they haven't been able to find that number 2. Let's move to defense. What the funny quote that I see Ohio State fans on Twitter are hanging on to is that Manny Diaz absolutely has strong feelings about Ohio State, but that he's absolutely going to keep them to himself. I see that Ohio State fans are quite upset about that, which I'm trying to understand, because they were upset when old man Lou Holtz told them how he felt, and then now they're upset for Manny Diaz keeping it to himself. I'm not sure what they want there. But what were your takeaways from Manny Diaz when you spoke with him this week?
Yeah, as far as that Ohio State goes, I think what he was referring to was the game plan. He has some thoughts on what Ohio State does and how to prepare for Ohio State, but he didn't want to share them, and he didn't really say much about Ohio State in general. So that's probably a case of a fan base wanting to add its excitement to what's going to be a pretty darn big game in a few weeks. Not that a Penn State-Ohio State game really needs excitement, but fans will create things sometimes, and I definitely don't think there's any bulletin board material there from what Manny Diaz said. But other than that, I really was interested in what Diaz had to say about Zane Durant. His quote about Zane Durant was he has that dog in him. And you watched the game Saturday. Durant had 3 tackles for loss and a big sack on 3rd and goal from the 3rd and 1 from the 2, maybe 3rd and goal, 3rd and 1 from the 2. It was really close to Penn State's goal line. And for whatever reason, Northwestern decided to drop back, and Zane Durant was right there to make that sack and force Northwestern to a field goal. But he's really coming into his own, and I think you have to start talking about Durant as maybe Penn State's top defensive tackle. I know Hakeem Beamon has been solid, but I think Beamon had the same amount of reps that Devon Elise did Saturday, so that tells me, I know it's only 1 game, but it kind of tells me that maybe they're splitting time a little bit and kind of rotating the defensive tackles. But Durant was somebody that James Franklin's talked highly of for a while. And you see the playing time he's getting as a true sophomore, and he's made the most of it. And I think Northwestern was maybe his best performance of the season. And it's kind of an interesting thought of thinking, because going into the year, we thought Hakeem Beamon would be Penn State's number 1 defensive tackle, but maybe Zane Durant is that guy already as a sophomore. So that little snippet about Zane Durant was kind of something that stuck out to me about Manny Diaz.
Yeah. I think you said a lot of good things there. So when Penn State, one of the interesting things we've done this past couple of weeks is put Denida Sutton, Chop Robinson, and Adisa Isaac in at the same time. Do you think that's something that we could run again, that Penn State is going to try against the Ohio States, against the Michigans of the world, especially Michigan, who's going to have that big physical offensive line?
Ooh, that's a good question. And it's hard to say. Because obviously, as you alluded to, playing Ohio State, playing Michigan is a lot different than playing Northwestern and even playing Iowa. With we all know about Iowa's offense, but when you have defensive ends as talented as Adisa Isaac, Chop Robinson, Deny Dennis Sutton, throw Amin Vanover and Zariah Fisher in there. James Franklin said before the year that they had 5 defensive ends that they feel they can win with. And when you're that confident in a particular position group, why not have a few more or one more in this case than you would think on the field at one time? Why not have Sutton, Isaac, Robinson, or some combination of defensive ends in there to make a free man defensive end group on the field at a given time? So it's hard to say what they'll do because preparing for Ohio State and Michigan is so different. But with as good as we all know about Chop Robinson, we've known about him and Adisa Isaac for a while. But in rewatching the Northwestern game, which I did Monday night, Deny Dennis Sutton was the guy that stuck out to me the most in that group. And he is quickly coming into his own as a starter on this Penn State defense. So, yeah, when you have a position group that's that loaded, why not kind of stack them and play free at the same time? So I wouldn't guarantee them to use that down the road in some of these bigger games, but I definitely wouldn't rule it out because Penn State is absolutely loaded at defensive end.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It will be interesting to see what they can do. Ohio State, especially, kind of the strength of their offensive line is the guard play. So, in a way, you might want to keep those defensive ends where they can eat on the outside where the offensive tackles are. Before we started recording, you mentioned that meeting with strength and conditioning coach Chuck Losey was maybe your favorite interview of all 3 of them. What did you learn from that, and what were your key takeaways?
Yeah, one answer I was really impressed with Chuck Losey is they asked him about the comment Franklin made last year about how the defensive tackles weren't big enough. His quote was, "Everybody thinks they're Aaron Donald and they're not." And Chuck Losey was asked if he took that quote personally, and he said no, he didn't take it personally. We can all, the strength of team and the whole program in general can just work to get better, and they've been using that. Just using that mindset. And whenever there's criticism, I'm not saying Franklin criticized Chuck Losey, but any criticism of the program, the coaching staff kind of takes in stride and kind of builds on that. So I was impressed with that. He mentioned Kavion Keys as a guy that's really been impressing in the weight room, and that's the 3rd time, at least in the past week, that somebody has mentioned Kavion Keys, the true freshman, as somebody that's been impressive in year 1. Franklin mentioned on his coach's show last Thursday that Keys is a guy that could get some playing time as the year goes on. Stacy Collins, who is his Penn State special teams coach, but also coaches Penn State's linebackers, mentioned him in his Zoom call with us. And then Losey mentioned him as somebody that's impressed from a body physical standpoint. And also Chuck Losey's mustache might be the best one in college football. So that's always an added bonus.
I saw that in tonight's press conference after practice that James Franklin admired Daniel Gallen's mustache. He's got a strong mustache game as well. But yeah, Chuck Losey's probably got one of the best ones in the country as far as coaching staff mustaches go. Yeah, I'd be curious to see what Kavion Keys, that recruitment, a lot of Penn State fans will remember because that was just such a back and forth recruitment with North Carolina. And not that they're stacked at linebacker right now, but Kavion Keys, the best is yet to come as far as his opportunities. And he could be somebody that maybe people forget about for some reason and really come on strong next year. And still maybe do some good things this year too. Penn State's halfway through the season, or at least almost halfway through the season, 5 games in. Most likely they're going to be 6-0 once they play UMass. What have you learned so far? And I guess what would you like to see them improve on as they hit the meat of their schedule?
Yeah, I think what we've learned is that this defense, we thought it'd be one of the best in college football. Now it's definitely in the conversation as possibly the best anywhere in the country. It's number one in total defense. And while we all expected Penn State to be good in that regard, we know how good Manny Diaz is. We knew the talent that the group had coming back, but I think it's exceeded our expectations coming in. So that's been a big takeaway of mine, is that this the capabilities and the ceiling of this Penn State defense is, there is no ceiling, and it's been even better, I think, than we projected coming in. And what needs to be worked on, I would say, I would kind of go back to what I said earlier, is what type of connection will Drew Aller and these receivers have? And also the running game. Will Nick Singleton be the player that he was last season? I haven't really seen that guy yet. Katron Allen, I think, has been closer to himself, but you look at the numbers, he's averaging almost a yard per carry less than he did last season. And a guy like Katron Allen, I think he's more of kind of a punisher. I like to say he runs angry. He's a guy that's going to get 7-8 yards and look impressive doing it. Whereas Nick Singleton is more of that home run threat, as we saw in the Rose Bowl last year. And I would say that Singleton has looked less like his old self than Katron Allen looks like his self from last year. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if the added weight has anything to do with it. I don't know if the opposing defenses have anything to do with it. I don't know if Penn State's offensive line has. I don't really know, but we're definitely waiting to see Nick Singleton break out the way he did multiple times last season. And then a key talking point has been explosive plays. Going back to last year, we know this team has explosive plays in it. The Rose Bowl is a perfect example. Longest touchdown reception in Rose Bowl history by Keandre Lambert-Smith. Third longest touchdown run in Rose Bowl history by Nick Singleton. Then the first touchdown this year was a 72-yard pass on the fourth play of scrimmage from Drew Aller to Keandre Lambert-Smith. And we watched that and we're thinking, okay, this offense is going to be fun. There's going to be a lot of big-time yards gained on a particular play, a lot of long touchdowns, 50, 60, 70, 80, whatever, how many yards. And it just hasn't gone that way. And Penn State, I think, has the fourth fewest plays of any FBS team, and there's 133 of them, the fourth fewest plays of 20 yards or more. And part of that's because they've been pretty good at grinding it out, having double-digit play drives and catching in on them once they get to the red zone. But we want to see more explosive plays, and I think the connection to Drew Aller and his receivers that aren't KLS will go a long way to doing that, as will Nicholas Singleton getting going. Both of those will play a huge part in solving that issue. I do think Penn State will have some big plays at some point, but people are getting impatient, and I think rightly so.
Yeah, impatient is the nice way to say it. I'm going to put you on the spot real quick here, Joe. Ohio State, Michigan. You think Penn State goes 2-0, 1-1, or 0-2 against those two teams?
Well, I'll preface by saying I could see any one of those things happening. I could see them splitting by beating Ohio State and losing to Michigan. I could see them splitting by losing to Ohio State and beating Michigan. I could see them winning both games. I could see them losing both games. Like, whatever scenario that is possible, I could see happening, because it really could go either way. If I had to guess, and this is what I said before the season, and I really see no reason to go back on my preseason prediction, because we all expected Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan to be undefeated through 5 games. I guess Ohio State's only played 4 games, but we all expected them to be undefeated in the first week of October, and they're all undefeated. So I'm going to say I have a harder time picking Penn State to win in Columbus, because they haven't done it since 2011. And that's kind of what sways me to pick Ohio State to win that game on the road. Not that Penn State is incapable of getting that win, but I am going to go with Ohio State. because Penn State's beaten Michigan at home before, and because we all know the home field advantage of Beaver Stadium provides, I'm more inclined to go with Penn State in that one. So the short answer is I see them losing to Ohio State, beating Michigan, and I see Penn State getting to the Big Ten championship game because I think we're going to see a reversal of what we had in 2016 to where Penn State needed Ohio State to beat Michigan in Columbus to get to win the Big Ten East and get to Indianapolis, and that's exactly what happened. I think this season Penn State will need Michigan to come through against Ohio State and Ann Arbor, and I think Michigan is going to beat Ohio State and Ann Arbor. So the final answer, and I can see it going anyway. Penn State could go anywhere from 10-2 to 12-0, but I will stand by my preseason pick and say Penn State loses in Columbus, beats Michigan at home, goes 11-1, makes the Big Ten title game, wins it, and ask me later about the college football playoff because that is much harder to predict, especially if Penn State has one loss.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That was Cory's prediction at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, you and I are on the same page, Joe. Are you ready to get into some guest picks?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So all these games are going to be outright. Who do you think is going to win? And then at the end, I have 3 games where you can pick the spread for some bonus points. Sound like a plan?
Yes.
All right, sweet. Just a friendly reminder for everyone listening: if you haven't got your pick'em picks in yet, make sure to do that. I believe Nebraska, Illinois is on Friday night, so make sure to get your picks in before kickoff on Friday night. That's when it will close. Shout out to our friend G-Wiz, who got his picks in, I think, 10 minutes before kickoff on this past Saturday. So get your picks in now. I don't know, I got about 20 or so people already got their picks in as of Wednesday. So, and then not too shabby. Usually you guys are pretty late with your picks. First game, Nebraska at Illinois. Nebraska just absolutely got blitzed. I told you guys that I thought Nebraska was going to cover against Michigan. I was wrong. Illinois thought maybe they would be able to do some good things against Purdue, and that was also not the case. So 2 really kind of disappointing teams, 2 teams kind of trending the wrong direction. Illinois is at home. Joe, who do you have winning this game?
Yeah, I have Illinois bouncing back as long as they can play the game, which I think they'll be able to. Memorial Stadium in Champaign, part of it caught on fire. I don't want to say too much because I haven't read too deep.
I haven't either, but I saw that too.
Yeah.
It's not funny, but I just like randomly saw it on Twitter. Yeah. I was like, what's going on there?
Yeah, but assuming everything's okay and that game can be played as scheduled, I like Illinois to bounce back. I think Nebraska's a bad football team and Illinois is coming off a bad loss. So it makes sense for them playing at home under the lights to right the ship, and Nebraska's a pretty good team to right the ship against. So I'll go Illinois.
Shawn, who do you have?
Yeah, I'm going with Illinois too. I don't think Nebraska is very good at football, and that helps to be able to win on the road. I think Illinois' defensive line probably gives them a lot of fits, and they end up winning. Although Illinois has been pretty bad this year, worse than I thought they'd be.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna take Nebraska to win because Nebraska's got to figure it out at some point, and I really think that Illinois loss to Purdue is going to hurt them more in the long run. Just one of those games you shouldn't have lost, and they didn't even look good against them. So I'm going to take Nebraska to win because why not? They've already hit rock bottom with the 45 whatever it was loss to Michigan at home. Maybe they're in wounded animal mode a little bit. They kind of picked themselves off, and you're right. Nebraska's not a good team, but if you had to face anybody right now, I think Illinois is a good opponent to maybe rebound with. Maryland at Ohio State. A lot of people are starting to fall into the Maryland trap a little bit as far as excitement for the Terrapins. They're on the road at Ohio State. Ohio State's coming off the bye. I think it started off as an 18-point spread, but I think it's actually kind of crept up close to 20. Joe, you have the Buckeyes winning that game?
I do. I want to say Maryland covers, but yeah, Maryland does this every year. At least it feels like they do it every year, where they're hot at the beginning, beat up on some bums, and get everybody's hopes up. And then once the weather gets colder, the leaves start to change. The real Terps stand up. And I think Maryland's a solid football team. They could win. I'll have to analyze the schedule, but they could probably win 8, maybe even 9 games. But they won't beat Penn State in a few weeks. They won't beat Ohio State Saturday. And this is where Maryland's offensive line, which has been suspect at best since Tagovailoa has been the quarterback, they'll start to get tested. And I can't give Maryland's offensive line the benefit of the doubt to protect baby Tua enough to where Tagovailoa can be at his best. So, I think Maryland could cover. They were competitive against Michigan last year, I think around the same time in Ann Arbor. But, Ohio State's winning this one.
Shawn, Buckeyes?
Yeah, I got the Buckeyes too. I feel very similar about Maryland as Joe does, as longtime listeners know. I think it's possible they could keep it semi-close, but Ohio State still wins by 3 scores.
Yeah, I have Ohio State winning as well. Rutgers at Wisconsin. Rutgers playing pretty good defense. I'm still not really sure what to expect of Wisconsin at this point of the season. Are they the best team in the Big Ten West? I just really don't know right now. Joe, Rutgers kind of, by the way, had a tough schedule as far as who they've had to play so far, but that's besides the point. Joe, Wisconsin, Rutgers, who do you have?
Rutgers has definitely been, I think, maybe not too surprising. Like, I don't know if shocking is the right word, but they've been better than I think a lot of people have expected them to be early on. I think slowly but surely, Greg Schiano is turning that program around, which he's already done before in his first stint at Rutgers. And Wisconsin feels like a team that could lose to just about anybody. Maybe part of it's guilt by association, them playing in the Big Ten West, but I wouldn't be totally floored if somehow Rutgers wins this game. That said, I'm going to pick Wisconsin. But what Wisconsin was supposed to be, I don't know if they were the odds-on pick to win the Big Ten West, but they were a team a lot of people thought would win the Big Ten West and maybe was a dark horse to win the Big Ten in general. I haven't seen that from them so far this season. I know they're 3-1, but the one real test they had was against Washington State, and they failed that pretty badly. I'm going to go Wisconsin, especially with it being at Camp Randall. But I think Rutgers is going to make this a game, and maybe some small but still existent upset alert for the Badgers in this one.
Yeah, if Rutgers, if they had any semblance of a passing game, I think they're an 8 or 9 win team. I think they're better than Maryland if they had a quarterback. Now that's a big if, and they don't really have anything from the passing game. And that being said, I'm gonna take the Badgers as well.
Yeah, you can't really be one-dimensional on the road, especially in a place like Wisconsin, Camp Randall. Closer than the experts think, but I have Wisconsin too. Howard at Northwestern. Not sure we have to spend too much time on this. Assume all 3 of us are on Northwestern.
Yeah, Northwestern's bad. They're not that bad.
Yeah, Northwestern.
Okay, maybe, I don't know if it's maybe the toss-up of the week, but probably. Purdue at Iowa. Iowa's quarterback and Shawn's favorite quarterback, Cade McNamara, out for the season. With an injury, they're going to be going to Deacon Hill the rest of the way. It's at Iowa. Purdue, again, coming off that, I guess, big win against Illinois. Joe, who do you have winning this football game? And I should say Iowa did beat Michigan State pretty much because of a punt return for a touchdown. Joe, who do you have?
I like the Boilers. It feels like this is the time of year where Purdue kind of starts to make some noise. It feels like Purdue, for whatever reason, has been perennially a slow starting football team. This year is no exception, but I liked how they looked against Illinois. And I think Iowa, without Cade McNamara, they needed a punt return to beat Michigan State, and that was with Kane McNamara playing part of the game. But yeah, I like Purdue. I like the offense. Purdue always has a solid offense, and I think last week against Illinois, scoring 44 points on should be a respectable Illinois defense, but they're playing well under that level so far. But nonetheless, 44 points in the Big Ten is nothing to sneeze at. And I think Hudson Card could still be pretty solid for them, that transfer. And the last time Purdue played at Iowa, they knocked off the number 2 ranked Hawkeyes in Iowa City. And I think Purdue's going to do it again.
I agree. I'm going to go boiler up here. I don't think, Purdue has impressed me a lot this year. I was not expecting much from them. I thought there's a chance they could finish last in the Big Ten West, and they haven't played like that at all. They've definitely impressed me, and Iowa is probably even worse than I thought they'd be, and I wasn't expecting them to be world beaters necessarily. But I think that offense is garbage. I have no other way to put it. And I'm gonna say Purdue pulls an upset here.
I'm gonna disagree with you guys again. I'm gonna take Iowa to win this game at Iowa. It will almost be a night game there. I think it's an afternoon kick. Their defense is so good. They're gonna score on so many different ways. And I'm curious to see if the offense is different with Deacon Hill. I don't know what to expect. I think they might be, dare I say, a little bit more explosive with him because they couldn't be any worse. Maybe a change will be good. So I'm going to take Iowa to win, but don't feel great about it. We'll wrap up Michigan at Minnesota. I believe this is technically for a rivalry trophy. Minnesota, talk about a team that we thought maybe would be a little, I don't know how good we thought they were going to be, but they're worse than we thought they were going to be. Joe, how do you see this one going?
Yeah, the PJ Fleck era's kind of fallen on hard times. Aside from that 2019 season, I don't really know about PJ Fleck's body of work in general. They've been a winning team, but you would think that they'd be a team that's been into multiple Big Ten championship games of how bad the West has been. I thought PJ Fleck was going to be the guy to get Minnesota to that level, and it's not looking like it right now. In Michigan is Michigan, so I definitely I'm going to go with the Wolverines in that one.
Yeah, Michigan wins this one. Minnesota lost to Northwestern. All you got to know. Makes it an easy pick.
That's a good point, Shawn. Yeah, I'm taking the Wolverines too. Joe, before we let you get out of here, you have an opportunity for bonus points here. You can take either the points with Maryland covering 18.5 versus Ohio State, or you can take Ohio State covering. You can take Rutgers, Wisconsin. Wisconsin's favored by 14. And then Michigan, Minnesota. Michigan's favored by 20.5. So which game and which team do you have covering that we can mark you down for?
Mark me down for Maryland. As I said, I don't think Ohio State's on upset alert, but I think they're on winning by fewer than 3 touchdowns alert. So we're still maybe close enough to September to where will be in the air. And Maryland was in a similar situation at Michigan last year and lost by 7. And I could see a similar result happening here. So Ohio State beats Maryland, but not by too much. Put me down for the Terps.
Sounds good. Yeah, you almost went like Terminator Robotronic on us there for a second, but we got through it there. Joe from Nittany Sports Now, thank you for joining us. Any final plugs for you and yourself as we let you get out of here?
Sure. You can follow. How's my audio now, by the way?
Oh yeah, you're perfect. It was just like a slight glitch in the Matrix. That's all.
Yeah. I need a new laptop, but nonetheless, you could follow our site on. I'm still calling it Twitter. If you want to call it X, you can. But that place. The account is at Nittany SN. My personal account is at Joe Smeltzer 775. We're on Facebook too, Nittany Sports Now, and the site is nittanysportsnow.com. Yeah, we'll have the season's not even halfway over, and we have a lot of good things coming ahead. Plus, we got wrestling starting. We got the Mike Rhodes era of basketball starting, and Guy Godowski should have a pretty good hockey team this year. All sports will be covered, and it's going to be a pretty exciting time, not just for football, but for Penn State sports in general. So, yep.
Sounds great. Well, Joe, thank you. You can just leave and we'll take care of the rest, but appreciate your time tonight.
Right. Thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome.
Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
There we go.
All right.
Well, shout out to Joe Smeltzer from Nittany Sports Now joining us. Appreciate his time. Sorry we couldn't get the looks like we got the video there for a second, but we are already underway there. So no video tonight, but nonetheless good content there. I like some of the stuff he mentioned, especially regarding Manny Diaz and Kavion Keys. There's some really good insight there, as well as with what Manny Diaz said about Zane Durant too.
Yeah, and he brought up some, the stuff we've been talking about on offense. It's been kind of the ongoing discussion among Penn State fans, and I think content creators in general. Just the lack of explosion, Nick Singleton, lack of explosion in the passing game. So yeah, it was really nice to talk to Joe. We've seen him on Twitter a bunch, and that's the first time that I've talked to him. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to kind of get into final thoughts on Northwestern, but also press conference notes. Most importantly, running back Katron Allen was seen at practice going through drills, so that's a good sign as far as his health goes. Offensive guard JB Nelson and defensive end Jameel Lyons were not seen, and the media specifically asked about JB Nelson, in which James Franklin says, for 9 years now, I've told you that we don't comment on injuries unless they're season ending. So it's not a season ending injury, according to James Franklin. I just want to say that is not always the case with James Franklin, because there were times, and Shawn, I don't know if you remember the exact injury. Maybe it was Landon Tangwall last year. I forget. But there were times where nobody asked about an injury because they just assumed that Franklin was going to say anything. And then when somebody finally asked, he's like, yeah, that person's out for the season. But it took somebody literally asking for that to be revealed. So I really appreciate the media, specifically, I don't want to say wasting their question per se, but asking the question, because otherwise I don't know if that would necessarily been released unless somebody asked it. So
yeah, this is one of those things that makes me think that a lot of college coaches, like, being in the NFL is a completely different thing. When you have to put an injury report out there, you have to even say what they have. And, we have no idea what's up with JB Nelson. And really, doesn't matter, not a whole lot, but like, if he doesn't expect to be, and then, like, the thing that happened with Smith Vilbert, and then Franklin goes in August, well, you guys never asked me about it.
Was that who it was, Smith Vilbert? Okay.
Yeah, and then he gets like an attitude when people ask him about it. And yeah, it's because you won't tell us. You just don't tell us anything. So right. Don't get don't get all feisty with the media when they ask you about it.
There's like a really good HIPAA law joke somewhere in there, like, that's my HIPAA, or I don't know, something like that. There's something there that would be pretty funny. But
the amount of people who have no idea what HIPAA is.
Hippopotamus?
Yeah, they just say HIPAA, and they think it's just the catch-all, and they're safe.
But see, and there's a funny thing too, because the irony that he did expand upon Trey Wallace and said that Trey Wallace was pretty much ready to go last week for Northwestern, and then re-aggravated right before the game started. And so he did kind of speak to that, and they expect to kind of have Trey Wallace for, I assuming, UMass at this point, because if he was pretty much ready to go until he re-aggravated it, you got 2 weeks to kind of get rid of that re-aggravation. Should have Trey Wallace back for UMass. I mean, you would like to, we talked about this a little bit last episode, but you'd like to have him back and let him get some rapport with Drew Aller before his first real snaps are against Ohio State. So I'm not saying he needs to play the whole game, but it'd be nice if they could have a couple of drives together in real action before facing the Buckeyes in Columbus, where bullets are going to be flying.
Oh, 100%. I want him to play against UMass. And that's just because he hasn't played it'll be a month at that point. So you don't want a guy to be rusty going into the shoe. And it was a good sign that he's continuing to practice, and he's from all reports from our people on the beat, he's moving well. And he doesn't, if it is a lower body injury, I mean, he's moving well in spite of having that injury. So definitely a good sign there. And I mean, Joe just talked about, and it's something that we've talked about pretty much on every podcast for the past couple of weeks. It's hard to fully evaluate these receivers without having Harrison Wallace out there, because Harrison Wallace, all through the spring, all through the summer, was seen as the definitive number 2 guy. So until we see the offense back with him, it's difficult to evaluate the receivers. Because I remember after the West Virginia game, we were saying, oh, God, the receivers look better than we thought they'd be. Well, that was with Harrison Wallace. And then we lose Harrison, and a lot more responsibility is put on the Liam Cliffords of the world, the Dante Cephas's, the Malik McLean's, and instead of having the wide receiver 3 responsibility, it's a big jump from wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 2.
It's funny because I don't know if you remember, Shawn, after that first game, people were actually mad about the defense and not the offense. Like, we came out of that first game and people were like, the defense needs to get their stuff together. And it's just so funny. Like, we always talked about those early freak out reactions, and now I guess a month later, it's like, well, maybe we were freaking out a little bit too much. So came back to earth a little bit there.
How many people actually admit that, though?
Yeah, I don't know.
Even though
probably none of them.
Yeah, probably none. But yeah, I mean, that's why it's hard to take a whole lot out of week 1 in some ways. But I mean, the defense, first of all, like we said against West Virginia, I mean, sometimes the other team has good players too. And West Virginia had the best offensive line we faced so far. And I didn't know that going into that game. I didn't know if they'd be a better offensive line than Iowa. I didn't know if they'd be a better offensive. Well, I thought they were a better offensive line than Illinois, but I didn't know for sure if they were a better one than Iowa. And now, as we sit here in October, when we have more games to evaluate, there's no question they're a better offensive line than Iowa. And they are probably the best offensive line we'll play outside of Michigan this season. So it's funny that the real test that I was thinking we're going to encounter in September, the biggest test was West Virginia, by no doubt about it.
Yeah, and it's funny because before the season started, it was like, people were saying West Virginia wasn't a good team, and so it's just a lot of things have changed. So I will be curious to see. West Virginia actually has a pretty favorable, dare I say, rest of the regular season. And it'd be interesting to see where West Virginia ends up and how big of a win that potentially could be. West Virginia avoids some opponents in the Big 12, so things actually look pretty good over there. They have Oklahoma, but otherwise they could be okay.
Yeah, they don't have to play Texas, right?
Correct. Yeah, they avoid Texas, and they have at Oklahoma but you know what? I think don't quote me on this, but I think they missed Kansas State too. I think.
Oh wow.
So,
yeah, I mean, there's a world that exists. They could find themselves in the Big 12 title game. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
No, I mean, you need probably some help, assuming they lose to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
They would need some help from Oklahoma, but otherwise, yeah, it's possible. James Franklin also mentioned tonight about Abdul Carter and said that he has calmed down a little bit and now he's doing his job. We talked a little bit about Abdul Carter on Monday, just the fact that he hasn't had that many opportunities because the defensive line has just been eating lunch. And we're excited to see what he does, the second half of the year. But we haven't seen the explosive plays yet, really, from Abdul Carter. And maybe that's because we haven't needed to, but it'll be interesting. I think the second half of the season could be an interesting one for Abdul Carter.
Yeah, because really with Abdul Carter, it's funny because he's been good. He's been good for sure, but I think his best football this season is to come, because I do think there's more that there's more that he could do, and he's sort of like, in a way, sort of like the defensive ends, in that I think Curtis Jacobs is playing at a high level right now, and those defensive ends in front of him are playing at a high level, that really they're making the plays before it gets to Abdul Carter. So there are going to be games coming up, namely Michigan, Ohio State, where, Abdul Carter is going to have to be the guy to make a play, because Michigan has a great offensive line. Ohio State has maybe great offensive line, and they're going to open up some holes, and Abdul's got to go and fill them. So I think his impact is going to be more noticed as the season goes on.
How important is it for, the calming down to me is what stood out when James Franklin said that, because to me, that's like, if you're not calm and you're not trusting your other fellow linebackers, that's when Michigan beats you, right? When you're not being gap sound, when you're not being trusting of your other linebackers to fill their holes, etc. That's when bad things happen. So in my mind, it's like pretty important for these linebackers who I don't think are getting enough credit to really be gap sound as we head into the chunk of the schedule.
Yeah, no doubt. And the guy next to him, Kobe King, has had a really good start to the season. And I've been impressed with him almost every single week, if not every single week. I thought he played a very good game on Saturday against Northwestern. And I think he's been good all season. Curtis Jacobs, he's another guy. He's Mr. Consistency. And I think Curtis almost gets forgotten about a little bit in this defense because there's so many stars on it. There's so many guys that have a chance to be first-round draft picks. And really, I mean, there was a discussion on sports radio show about who could guard Brock Bowers. And I mean, I think it's a good question because Brock Bowers is the best tight end we've seen in a long time in college football. Dare I say Curtis Jacobs? I feel like Curtis Jacobs would have some success against him because he's physical and he's got length and he could run. So I think he's the type of guy that's kind of the prototype in what teams are looking for in a 2023 defense in college football.
What about Zakee Wheatley? Do you think he's got enough size? He's got the length.
He's got the length. But like I said, he's a little thin, so I think he could bulk up a little bit. But maybe, because he's physical still, even though he's kind of thin. He's still got some physicality to him.
Why not Tyler Elston? We saw him in man coverage.
Maybe Tyler Elston could handle. He did it on Cam Porter.
I honestly like jokes aside. Like, shout out to Tyler Elston because he had a good game on Saturday.
Last couple of games he's been good.
But it is probably not best to put Tyler Elston on Brock Bowers.
I mean, honestly, he's probably last time I listened. but I mean, hey, he's doing some good things. And I do feel like he's getting better with the load he has, and he's doing his job. And that's something that, I hate to sound like a patriot, but I mean, Bill Belichick won 6 Super Bowls, so there's something to doing your job and everybody having a job to do and doing it. And Franklin also talks all the time about got everybody in the program having a role. And I think they finally found a role for Tyler Elsdon where he could excel in.
Yeah, and the last thing I just mentioned that Mike Yursich actually brought up during his interview was that the pass game, quote unquote, has a lot left. Or I'm sorry, the offense has a lot left, specifically in the pass game. So, Shawn, just wrapping up your thoughts so far on the pass game. One more time, I'm going to give you the chance. Is there something that we haven't seen yet from this pass game? Are they hiding some things? If you saw the film breakdown that's on Twitter, I showed examples where literally Theo Johnson was open for a first down and Drew Aller was already checking down before Theo Johnson had a chance to really get into his route. Is that more of the issue, or are we about to be blown away come Columbus on October 21st?
Well, in all my years of watching football, I've watched football consistently for over 20 years. I've never seen a team's identity completely change in the course of a season. So do I think we're going to go from being a ball control offense to the 2016 Penn State offense where it feels like every drive either is a 3 and out and it's 4th and 16, or we hit a 50-yard bomb that sets us up for a touchdown? No, I just don't think that's who this offense is going to be. And that's okay. That's okay. Do I think they could add some more fireworks to this offense? Sure. Sure they could. Drew Aller has shown the ability to throw the ball downfield. He's shown the ability to fit the ball in small windows. So it's possible. Now, I think there's got to be some trust developed with his receivers. I mean, for the blog, he put out his video, and he was pretty hard on the offense in general, and saying, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it's pretty inexcusable in week 5 to still be having just complete miscommunication issues between the receivers and Drew Aller. So that's something that needs to be fixed in the bye week. And I hope that that the explosion could be solved in the bye week. And I just hope Nick Singleton could stop pressing in the run game. I know you didn't ask about the run game, but that's another thing.
Well, that's fine, because that's kind of where we're going to go next here as we kind of get to the season recap so far. Run game not been where it's really needed to be. I mentioned a little bit on this on Monday, but I really think they missed Brenton Strange. After watching the film, I actually feel like Hunter Norzad's done a pretty good job as far as getting to the next level. I don't think that JB Nelson has done as good of a job that Hunter Norzad did last year at the left guard spot as far as getting to the next level. There was a play early on inside the 5 where it's a touchdown if we can just get to the next level, and we failed to do that. But definitely, I think we missed Brenton Strange. I think it was T. Frank brought up pulling the tight ends, and they kind of missed Brenton Strange as far as the ability to really make that trap block on whoever they're trapping. So that to me has been the biggest thing as far as why the run game is there. Yes, the receivers, they probably need to be better as far as run blocking goes, but I really think things would be better if they had Brenton Strange right now. Which, by the way, I don't know if you saw this or not, but Brenton Strange got 2 penalties on one play. He got a holding penalty, and then he got a late hit penalty on one play in the Jaguars game on Sunday.
Oh boy. Oh man. Yeah, we definitely miss Brenton Strange because Theo just isn't as good of a blocker as Brenton Strange. call it as it is. And neither is Warren. I mean, we just don't have a tight end that's as good of an all-around tight end as Brenton Strange has been. And I mean, Brenton Strange is one of the best all-around tight ends we've had in a long time at Penn State. Him and Pat are both stand out in that way as being two guys that could not only catch the ball, but could also go and block. And it's harder and harder in today's college football to be able to find a guy who could do both at a high level, and that was just who he was. I don't think either of our tight ends are turnstiles either. I don't think, either of them are like our buddy Mike Gesicki, and that you just don't ask Mike to block. He could go catch. He's an excellent receiver, but don't ask them to block. I don't think they're that. I don't think that they're like that inept or anything, but they're just average blockers, and it's a little disappointing. I was hoping for more from both of them in the blocking game.
No, yeah, I agree with that, and I think Warren's been a little bit better than Johnson, and they haven't been, like you said, they haven't been awful, but just
I agree.
Brenton Strange was so good. There was actually one play where Nick Singleton actually took a hit and kept his balance. And I thought that was one thing that he was struggling with a little bit. So it was nice to see him actually keep his balance on a play. I'm still, and I know I was wrong about what he was going to do against Northwestern, but I'm still in the camp that he's going to be okay. And again, it's easier to make that call knowing that he's done it before. And I don't know. I would understand if nobody would believe me at this point, but there were moments, there were flashes where I think it's weird because it just hasn't like been a snap, but he keeps getting closer and closer, I think, game in and game out. And I think it's going to happen. Maybe not. I don't know, but I think it's going to happen.
Cephas, right?
Did I say Cephas? I meant Singleton.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you did say Singleton. Yeah, I mean,
you think I lost my mind there for a second.
Yeah, no, it's just your co-host. Yeah, I mean, Nick, I think he's just pressing a little bit right now, and there is so much emphasis on, not bouncing it outside, keep going through the hole, and I think it's been overcorrected a little bit, and I think they got to make run calls that Nick is going to be comfortable with. I mean, I think last year it really worked. And yeah, were there some times last season where he bounced out when he shouldn't have? Yeah. But that's okay. That's okay too. Saquon Barkley's one weakness. The only knock against him is sometimes he dances too much in the backfield, and he's always looking for the home run ball. He's a pretty damn good running back anyway. I mean, I don't think you could live with that. And Singleton, although not the same runner nearly as Barkley with the lateral quickness and everything, they had similar problems in that when Singleton would get the ball last year, he was always thinking home run because he knew he could do it. And he's almost trying to be a bruiser this year, and he's just not a bruiser. That's just not his style. And I hope that he will get back to what he's done. And I mean, look, they're correctable issues. Him and our 2 5-star athletes on offense, they both have correctable problems. Drew Aller needs to trust his golden arm a little more. Okay, that's fine. We could work with that. I'd rather that than him having 8 interceptions and 9 touchdowns right now. I'd rather that. Nick Singleton, yeah, he just has to be himself a little bit more. Also a correctable problem. So those 2 problems in particular are definitely correctable.
Anything else? I know you accidentally brought up Dante Cephas, but I think it's fair to say that we've kind of been disappointed at this point in the season with both the transfers, Dante Cephas and Malik McLean.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I think they both have had moments that have been good. Definitely some positives. But yeah, I mean, Cephas was targeted 8 times on Saturday and made 2 catches. I mean, that's just not
that one where he's blocking when the out route's being thrown. They could have called pass interference, not just been an incomplete. They could have called pass interference.
Yeah, if the official wanted to be a stickler, yeah, that's technically pass interference. If it was a defender doing it to him, yeah, that flag's coming right out. So yeah, he needs to learn the plays from what it looks like from my eyes. He has to know what to do. And yeah, it's hard coming in the summer, but I mean, look, the clock's ticking and he still has a little bit of time to learn, but it's time to go. It's time to go. Or in my mind, it's time to sit. Malik McLean, I mean, he had a couple bad moments and we've never seen him again. I mean, he had a couple bad moments against Illinois, and then that was it. There was no more Malik McLean again. And Dante.
Yeah, that one's almost puzzling to me.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like that one feels like an overreaction because outside of the two, I know he didn't make the most of his opportunity. He didn't. But I mean, we don't see him anymore, and I do think he could still be a weapon in this passing game, in certain situations.
Yeah. I agree with that. I mean, Malik McLean had a good game against West Virginia. And so I got it. 2 bad drops, but and he honestly had he's had moments of good blocking. He's had some moments of bad blocking, but I mean, I liked what I saw from Malik. I almost wonder him not playing as much was more because of Omari Evans getting healthier or just because of those mistakes. And I feel like it's more of Omari Evans, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, possibly. I mean, we and Harrison Wallace. I mean, we had 2 guys out that we were really counting on this year, and Omari Evans played a lot more than I thought he did on Saturday, and it bothers me a little bit that the offense, which was sputtering through most of the game, he didn't get the ball at all, and that could be on him not getting open. I'd have to go and really, really watch him. But it is a little, what's the word? Odd that he didn't get a touch on Saturday, because he's a guy that we both expected quite a bit from this year, and especially my esteemed co-host, Mr. Lestochi. But I was also expecting, a pretty productive season from him this year, and he's really not done much. But supposedly he has struggled with staying healthy as well.
Shawn, do you want to go over our bold predictions?
Yeah, I think I actually forget what mine are right now.
I just went and found them for you.
I know my Keaton Ellis one does not look good right now.
All right, so you have. I had Katron Singleton over 30 combined touchdowns, total touchdowns.
That actually looks good, right?
They have 8 combined rushing, and they have, let's see here. Katron Allen has 0, but Nick Singleton, I guess, only has 1. So that's 9. So they're almost a third of the way to the goal, almost halfway through. So I need
they're a little behind schedule.
Need a big game against UMass. Need 4 touchdowns to get me back on track there against UMass. And even then, that wouldn't be quite good, but that would help.
Well, I mean, Don Brown's mustache loves cover 0, so the touchdowns could come.
Let me see if I can find. Okay, yeah, your offensive one was Olu top 4 pick All-American, so we won't know that for a little bit.
I'm liking my top 4 prediction. All-American, I still like it. I still like my prediction.
Okay, defensively, this is where I probably feel a little bit better than you, but not much better. Hold on a second, Shawn. If you wouldn't mind just speaking, I need 50 sacks. I'm not there yet, but 1 second.
Okay. Yeah, 50 sacks is definitely doable in this defense. I think we're north of 20 right now. And if you have a couple more games like we did against Northwestern, where we had 7 sacks, and I do think there are opportunities on the schedule. You think of Michigan State, whose offensive line is pretty dreadful. You think of UMass, who we get to play this week. Yeah, so the opportunities are going to be there, and Cory, I think, should be feeling a little bit better for sure about that prediction. My bold prediction for defense was Keaton Ellis to have 5 or more turnovers. Right now he's at 1. You got that against Delaware, so we do need Keaton to turn it up a little bit. The thing with the safety room was I kind of thought that Keaton Ellis would be penciled in as a starter. And granted, he plays a lot, but KJ Winston has just been so ahead of schedule in my eyes. And I really liked KJ Winston out of high school. And he's already playing at a level that I kind of thought he'd be playing at as a junior, as a sophomore. So it's been very encouraging to see how quickly he's developed. On the other hand, it has hurt my preseason bold prediction. So what are you going to do? I guess I'll take the trade-off.
Yeah. Penn State's at 20 sacks. So if they were able to get 5 against UMass, I'd be right on pace. Now, you'd kind of like to be ahead of that, but, beggars can't be choosers there. So if they can get to 6 even or 7, another 7-sack game would be fantastic as far as getting to that 50. And then you talked about it. Let me see. I mean, it's just 1, correct? It's just that 1 for Keaton Ellis.
Yeah, only the one against Delaware. I think he had the first of the season. But since then it hasn't been a whole lot. And I was saying, like, I didn't know KJ Winston was going to be so ahead of schedule. I mean, he's really at where I thought he'd be next year already. Right. So, I mean, guy's a stud.
Absolutely. How are you feeling? Like, I don't want to talk too much Ohio State, Michigan, because I think everyone does. But how are you feeling about Ohio State? How are you feeling about Michigan right now?
I think Ohio State, I think they're different than they've been. But not completely in a negative way on their end either. I think their defense is better than it's been in the past few years. I think their offense is worse than it's been in the past few years. So it's going to be a different kind of game than I think I thought it would be to start the season. I still don't trust Kyle McCord. He had a great moment against Notre Dame, no question about it. But they still only put up 17 points. And in today's day and age, especially when you have a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. at wide receiver, not to mention Emeka Egbuka and Julian Fleming, it's underwhelming. And I know Notre Dame, they're not a slouch on defense, but I expected a little more explosion from Ohio State than I've seen this season. But like I said, they do have a better defense than I thought they'd have. Michigan, their run game hasn't been overly impressive. I think there's something like 41st in rushing offense right now. And last season, if you remember, we were going into the Michigan game, I think this week, they were number 1 by I think a significant margin in the country. So, I mean, it's not like we're only through 2 or 3 games where stats could get deceiving. I mean, we're halfway through the schedule now. So there's still a lot of things there's still things we don't know, but there are some things coming in that are real. And I just don't know about them. I think JJ McCarthy, I think he's been really, really good this year. Really good. And I think he is the best quarterback in the Big Ten right now. I know Caroline won't like to hear that. But I would have him as top guy right now. I think Roman Wilson. I think he took another step this season. So they probably scare me a little more in the passing game right now, if you could believe that. And their defense is really good again. So that's not a surprise under Jim Harbaugh. So I think we could beat them both. I think we could also lose to them both. So it's one of those things. Now, our friend Mike last night when we were texting brought up an interesting thought. And he said he thinks we either win them both or lose them both. Do you agree with that, Cory?
I don't. I mean, I don't think that's not possible. Obviously, that's possible, but I don't think that right now. This year especially, I just keep coming back to playing at home just means so much, especially what we've seen with the offense so far on the road versus at home. At this point, I feel much more comfortable at playing at home. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I get that. And you've watched how Drew has played on the road versus how he's played on the road, on the road as opposed to how he's played at home.
Right.
And that completion percentage, I mean, 20-some points, that's a big number.
Right.
And
the competition has honestly been better at home.
Yeah. I mean, West Virginia is a better team than Illinois or Northwestern. And Iowa has a better defense than both of them. Iowa might not have an offense, but they got a defense. And yeah, it's interesting. And another thing I wanted to ask you, Cory, do you think...
I'm here to answer your questions anytime, Shawn. On the pod, off the pod, doesn't matter. I'm here for you.
Do you think it's crucial for the program's perception, I guess that's the best way to put it, to make the playoff this year? Because in 16, we didn't make the playoff. 17, we didn't make the playoff. 19, 22, we had chances and we just couldn't do it. Do you think James Franklin needs to make the playoff this year in the last year of the 14 playoff?
I don't think so. I just think as far as making the playoff goes before it expands, I don't think it's important. To me, the goalpost just moves a little bit, right? Because making the playoff once it's 12 teams obviously won't be valued the same as it is now. But there's still going to be value somewhere. You just have to find it. In my case, it just moves to making it to the second round of the playoff. And so there's still going to be opportunities to prove your program is good or valuable and still prove that they're relevant. So I don't think it's a must, but I will say this. Penn State fans will probably look at the last 6 to 8 years and kind of wonder what if, and maybe it's a lot of missed opportunities. Now, I will say this, and I think it's important. Early on there, 2016, 2017, realistically, they didn't have the offense and defensive line to really compete at a playoff level. They happen to have some really stellar athletes that made up for things, but they didn't really have the depth and the guys up front on both sides of the football to really compete consistently at the playoff level. And I think we've found that out now, because now that we're close to that level, it's become evident just a few pieces you need to get there. Now, could you maybe argue that the skill positions haven't been to that same degree? Maybe. You could probably definitely make that argument as far as tight end and wide receiver goes. I mean, we've had really good players, even NFL caliber players, but we haven't had a Saquon Barkley. You might not have had really a Mike Gesicki or a Pat Freiermuth since then. You haven't even had the second and third wide receivers all at the same time like you did when you had Godwin and Hamilton, even Blacknall. You've had good receivers since then, Hamler, Dotson, but you maybe haven't had that same wide receiver core that you had. And so it would be frustrating, but I don't think it's the end of the world. And I just like to remind people that making the playoff doesn't mean really anything for your program. Go back and remember what Washington went to the playoff. I know they're more relevant again now, but they really dipped low into the valley even after they went to the playoff. Michigan State made the playoff. So I don't think making the playoff was just a badge that you could put on your coat and then you could walk into a recruit's home, and then all of a sudden do better. I think the sustainability that James Franklin has built at Penn State, it was not a 1-year thing. And would it have helped? Yeah, probably, sure. But the consistency that they've been able to display, apart from the COVID year and 2021, which I think is still part of the COVID year as far as the recruiting and depth goes, they've been consistent. From 2016 to now, minus COVID, they've been consistent. And to me, that has been more important for the relevancy of this program as we head into the expansion playoff era.
Yeah, there's something to be said about the consistency for sure. And I mean, you look around at the coaches that have come and gone from programs. And then, I mean, we've had Franklin here for almost a decade now. And I think it's a sign that I'm getting older, that it just feels like a couple weeks ago that he was hired. But it's been a long, long time that he's been here. But I mean, the thing with and you could say perception's important or it's not important. I think in some ways it could be, especially on the recruiting trail, because what opposing coaches say about James Franklin is he doesn't beat good teams. And it's iffy on if it's right. He hasn't beaten Ohio State. He's only beaten Ohio State once. And who's the best Michigan team he's beaten? 2019 with Shea Patterson? I mean, so that's where I think perception could start to matter in some recruiting battles. But yeah, are you correct that if you get to the playoffs, like I think in 2016, that there's no way we beat Clemson or Bama. I just don't think that happens. I think we could score, unlike Ohio State did against Clemson, but I don't think we beat them. We just don't. Who's going to block Christian Wilkins? Who's going to block Dexter Lawrence? I mean, Brian Guy is not going to do it. I'm just telling you right now. Or Derek Dowry. It's just not happening. 17, maybe there'd be more of a shot to win a game. I do think that 17 team was better. 19, they weren't beating Joe Burrow. It just wasn't happening. Really, I think last season they might have had the best shot to win a game, because I do think we would have beat TCU if we got fortunate enough to draw them in the first round. Michigan, well, we saw what happened at Ann Arbor, and I don't think we would have beaten Georgia. So it's fair to say I don't think any of those teams would have won a national championship either.
No, and call me crazy, but playing Michigan on a neutral site field, I think, changes things a little bit. That game went perfectly the right way for Michigan as far as, low scoring affair. And, you see what happens when a pretty meh TCU team is able to score points and make Michigan have to throw the ball. They eventually make some mistakes. So, to me, the knock with Franklin, or even the program, I should say, not even with Franklin, but the program in the playoff expansion era, the 4-team playoff era, I should call it, really shouldn't be on not beating Ohio State or Michigan. Penn State and Michigan are 3-3 in the last 3 games. I get what you're saying as far as what's the best Michigan team they face, but if they lost to us, who knows where they end up being too, because who knows how things go after a loss, right? And so I know we wouldn't look at that Michigan team last year as good if we went in there and beat them at their place. You know what I'm saying? But
yeah, or in 2021.
Yeah.
That they wouldn't have made the playoffs again.
Exactly. That being said, what I do think, if you're going to criticize the program, you have to think about the 2018 Michigan State game. You have to think about, what was that, the 2019 Minnesota game?
Yeah.
Those are the games I think there's fair criticism for. Those are the games where you wish you had back. Guess you could even throw 2016 Pitt into there, although didn't really know any better at the time. 2019 we knew. 27 was it 2017 and 2018 with Michigan State?
Yeah.
We knew. So those are the ones to me that if you're going to say like what if, those are the ones, because those are the ones Penn State really should have won. You go back to the Ohio States and the Michigans. I know there were opportunities to win those games too, but to me, Penn State wasn't really, at least to Ohio State, wasn't really in that same depth department. As we move forward, and I think this year counts too, right? Like the depth is here. The depth is the best it has been. They've got to find a way, obviously, to take care of business. But imagine if they would have like lost to Illinois or didn't take care of West Virginia or Iowa. Those would have been detrimental to the program. Maryland would be a good example this year. Like, can't find a way to lose to Maryland because those are the ones where you kind of then start thinking, okay, what are we really doing here? But if they're able to continue down the consistent path, I think Penn State fans are going to be okay. And the end goal is not going to be them making the playoff in 2024. It's going to be them winning a game in the playoff. And that to me is, you don't want to just get somewhere. You want to be able to do something when you got there. Like nobody in their mind thought Michigan State was going to beat Alabama that year. So it's not about just getting there. It's about winning the whole damn thing. And these Penn State teams, the way Franklin has built them moving forward, they're going to be able to get to the playoff when it expands and win games. And that to me is going to keep them relevant more than just making the playoff, say, in 2019.
Yeah. I mean, and there is something to be said about handling business against teams that you should beat. And last year is a great example of that. We beat every single team we were favored against, every team. I think some fans, they would like to see an upset here and there. I mean, look at Michigan State. You brought up Michigan State under Mark D'Antonio. They were always knocking off top teams. In 2015, I have no idea how they beat that Ohio State team with the third string quarterback. And I thought that Ohio State team was better than the team that won the title in 2014. I remember driving home from State College and I'm going on break, and I was like, oh my God, Ohio State's going to lose to Michigan State with the third string quarterback. So I think I would like to see an upset more often, or winning a game we're not supposed to more often under James Franklin. And I think there are a lot of fans that share that opinion. Now, that some of the fans overreact to not getting that done, but I think it is a fair thing to bring up.
Yeah, they don't have very many games on their schedule as they maybe did early on too that they're not favored in, right? You basically only have 2 a year now, right. and that's it. I will give you that. I will say, like, when it's so magnifying like that, it is what it is. Like, either you do or you don't, and you only have so many opportunities. If they were getting stomped around like they did last year to Michigan all the time, okay. But, I mean, Shawn, you just got to think with Ohio State, I don't know if it's this year or next year, you think they've got to finally break through again. I mean, you just like, you got to run out of ways to lose these games. Like, knock on wood, but they keep finding different ways to do it. Now, I will say this, a lot of the times, and I think maybe you spoke about this before, maybe it was our buddy Higgins, but a lot of those Ohio State games, they lost because somebody on Ohio State's defensive line decided to absolutely go freak mode. And you would think, knock on wood with injuries, that Penn State's offensive line is the most equipped it's ever been to prevent something like that from happening. Caden Wallace didn't even play against Ohio State last year. So before we get all the Caden Wallace haters, didn't have him out there against JTT. So you got to feel like this offensive line is the best to not let those things happen, because Boza, Young, JTT, and probably who was the other? Was it Hubbard or
Sam Hubbard?
Sam?
Yeah.
Like
Zach
they
Harrison played well against us. Yeah.
they had just too many back-breaking plays against Ohio State, and that's really been the difference when you go back and look at all of it. Even the game where what was that 2019? Had to be 2019 when Clifford got hurt and Levis came in.
Yep.
They even had a chance to win that game.
They did. They played really well.
Thought they had a
we
chance.
played really well that day.
With pretty much the entire offense was Will Levis as a battering ram forward, and they almost won that game. So you just think they got to get over the hump there. I think the Michigan stuff, I don't mean to discredit Michigan because they have a really good football team, but it's not like Penn State hasn't been there with them before. So I think a lot of people nationally, I don't think Michigan fans or Ohio State fans feel this way, but I think nationally people just clearly put Penn State below the pedestal. And like, yes, from like the end results, that's correct. But I think they'd be very mistaken to not kind of view these three teams as three teams that can all beat each other.
I think this year they do. I think this year Penn State is seen as up with them. And I think it has to do with their defense. Penn State has played like the best defense in the country, not just in the Big Ten, but in the country. You think about Georgia, they're not as loaded on defense this year. They're just not. They're good. They're really good. But Auburn just ran all over them. And Auburn just lost A&M. And A&M is pretty mediocre.
Hey, we're gonna talk about games to watch while Penn State's on a bye to wrap this puppy up. By the way,
yeah. So Bama got carved up by Texas. Granted, we haven't played a Texas yet. Totally fair, but I mean, I don't think that great SEC defense that always seems to be lurking. In the event you make the playoff, you're like, oh my God, how do we handle these guys? We might have that defense that people are like, oh my God, how do we handle these guys? And it's, like I said, it's early. I still want to see how we do against the Michigans, against the Ohio States. I'll even put the Marylands of the world in there because we haven't faced an offense as good as Maryland's yet. But yeah, I mean, I think of us as having just as good of a chance as Michigan or Ohio State of winning the conference right now.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, we had a comment here from RS saying, hopping on late, appreciate you guys and your show. Not sure if you have talked about it, but the 2024 class shaping up to be really good. A lot of underrated guys. We've talked about 2024 quite a bit. I think maybe we can talk recruiting on Monday's show, Shawn. We're gonna preview UMass as well on Monday's show, not Wednesday. We will have no show next week on Wednesday. But Monday's show, we're going to preview UMass. Maybe we can dabble more into recruiting. We didn't mention new commit Brady O'Hara in the 2025 class, not to be confused with the 2024 class. Another Catholic school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Brady O'Hara, listed as an athlete, most likely a tight end, 4-star guy, top 10 in the state of PA. That 2025 class right now is top 5, top 10, I think, on 24/7 Sports. The 2024 class, just to wrap that up, is fringe top 10 wherever you look, 11-ish, 12-ish.
11 at 24/7, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So right there, looking really good. Shawn, I'm just going to mention him because you were right about him. I want to give you fair credit on your boy, Peter Gonzalez.
Yeah, he's having an excellent season. He was the guy we talked about in the summer when he committed. He was hurt all last season, and it really hurt his recruiting ranking just because he didn't have junior film to put out there. So he is returned with a vengeance, and he is really tearing it up out in Western PA right now. And I would expect a big bump for him. I think we mentioned that Jalen Harvey and Franklin talked at the Iowa game, at the whiteout game. So that saga continues. I still, from what it sounds like, it's either us or USC. I still think he comes to Penn State, but we shall see. It feels like, and granted, I guess they're all D1 football players. Feels like all of our high school guys, they're all tearing it up this season on the
Yeah.
um
The ones that are
on
playing,
the
we mentioned a couple that are out for the season, but
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I have 100% confidence in the recruiting department as far as bringing in guys, regardless of their 3 or 4 stars, obviously 5 stars. They have figured out they've got it down. You could maybe make the argument they can improve as far as who they're scouting offensive line wise. I think they've done better than in the last couple cycles, but
Better with
everywhere
Carolina
else,
for sure. Yes.
yeah, but everywhere else, I mean, running back obviously, tight end obviously, quarterback. I think we're going to be saying obviously with Grunkmeyer too. That's been better, I think, with Yursich. The only position you could maybe argue is wide receiver, maybe. And I think that's getting better. It's so early still with Higgins.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of why Stubblefield was ousted, was receiver. He just wasn't recruiting well enough. And I mean, I really like this. I really like the class that the receivers that Marquise Higgins is bringing in. Just looking something up. I want to make sure I could share it. Keep going, Cory.
Okay. I will say this. We had a question here from Beetle. Not going to really do fan questions tonight, but we'll answer this one. What's more impressive, shutting out Iowa or scoring 31 on what's understood to be a top defense? How does Iowa's defense compare to Michigan and Ohio State's? I think Iowa has good depth on defense relative to what Penn State's seen so far. A really good corner in Cooper DeJean, who had a punt return touchdown against Michigan State. That being said, the secondary elsewhere for Iowa, probably not as good. The linebacker play and the speed, probably not as good as those other. And then Ohio State and Michigan both have dogs on the defensive line, not just good depth. Iowa had good players, nobody like Van Ness or previous players that they've had over the years that really makes you terrified of them. Good players, nothing absolutely terrifying though. That's kind of the difference. Ohio State has game changers on defense. Besides Cooper DeJean, I don't really know if they had anybody like that yet. Now that could change because they develop talent really well, especially at linebacker at Iowa and defensive end, but and safety for that matter, but not really there quite yet. And schematically, Iowa is very conservative as far as going to give you the easy stuff. Ohio State and Michigan are going to mix it up a little bit more because they have the athletes to do it. And additionally, we saw Northwestern. I saw them go to cover 2 zone with only rushing 3 to the quarterback and then actually putting another man with zone, putting another man, going man coverage on one receiver. So they go zone, and then they'd cover Theo Johnson, or they'd go zone, and then maybe they'd cover Keandre Lambert-Smith. They also ran a lot of man coverage in 3rd and long. So Northwestern actually, I don't want to say put a blueprint out there, but what they did was we're going to keep our 2 safeties back, so you can't go over the top, but we're still going to load the box to stop the run, and we're going to dare you to pick us apart because there are holes in the zone, especially on the hook to curl towards the numbers. But can you find them consistently? And then if we get you in 3rd long, we're going to play man covers. So I think you're going to see a lot of that from Michigan and Ohio State. You didn't really see that from Iowa most of the time. So that to me is what you'll see there. Really got to see if Ohio State's going to trust their defensive line to get after Penn State. That to me is going to be the difference. If Penn State's offensive line can hold up against Ohio State's front 4 and make them bring extra guys, then it's basically just up to Penn State's receivers to get open. And then Drew Aller should be able to find those guys pretty easily. So that to me is going to be interesting, but completely different schematically between Iowa and Michigan and Ohio State. Shawn, did you find what you're looking for?
I did. I can't share exactly what I wanted, but there's a receiver, because we were talking about receiver recruiting. Name is Nye Carr. Keep an eye on him. Keep an eye on him. That's all I'm going to say. He's from the great
Yeah.
state of Georgia. I might be able to share more next week.
Well, there was something on YouTube about Carr
Okay.
and about, maybe if I can remember this, because I watched this on YouTube, but I believe Carr was I don't know if he wasn't committed to Georgia, was he?
He was committed to Georgia.
Okay.
So he decommitted from Georgia.
Yeah.
He's getting interest from a lot of schools in the South and from Penn State.
Was one of the other schools in Miami involved
Yes.
there?
Yeah. He is visiting Miami this week. I could say that.
Yeah. That's what I believe I was free to the world
Yes.
based off YouTube, because I do not, to keep my mind, I only take recruiting news from what is publicly available for people that are curious.
That's a good way to be.
Yeah. So anything I know is because it is allowed to be known. Just if anyone was curious about that. Shawn, I want to wrap this puppy up. Last thing I want to say, Penn State's obviously off this week. We will be back Monday to preview UMass because we will not be on Wednesday. Before we do that, games that you're going to be paying attention to this weekend.
Maryland, Ohio State. We play them both.
Hold on a second. Start over, Shawn.
Okay. Maryland and Ohio State. We play both of them. Maryland wants to say that they're real. Let's see it. I really think if Maryland, and there are no moral victories in the world of Big Ten football, no question about it. But if they could play Ohio State close, they have my attention. If they could keep it within 10 points, okay, they could beat you. And I will take them seriously, especially doing it in the shoe. And we have to go to Maryland, keep in mind. So they have my attention then. If they end up getting beat by 20, I just go, okay, same old Maryland. If they beat Ohio State, then they're a real threat. So definitely watch that one. Also, Kentucky, Georgia. Look, Georgia wants to be the new Bama. This is a game that Bama in their heyday would win by 20 points. People doubting them, people running their mouth about them, going, this is the year we're going to go get Bama. And then Bama and Nick Saban goes, do you know who I am? And just runs away with it. And then we all go, oh, yeah, it's Bama. That's right. Could Georgia do it this week? If Georgia could do that, then I go, all right, well, Georgia's still the team to beat. If they lose or they look unimpressive again, then yeah, that's a really mortal team. And they could be beaten by the Nittany Lions. So those are the two games that I'm really focusing on this weekend.
Yeah, that's a good point with Georgia. And to the opposite side of that with Bama, Bama's on the road at Texas A&M. Kind of a big game there. A&M kind of can't lose anymore as far as in the SEC West goes. Same with Alabama for that matter, as far as their playoff hopes go. So big game out there. A&M has the talent from a recruiting blue chip ratio perspective to play with Alabama. So just keep an eye on that one out there. That's the same thing. Can Alabama do what Alabama usually does, or is that kind of not the case with Alabama anymore? Red River rivalry, Oklahoma, Texas. Texas already beat Bama. Can they keep it going? Oklahoma's been quiet. Is Oklahoma for real? I'm curious about that. Their defense looks a lot better. I wanted to mention that there's a couple sneaky games that I really like. I really like the Washington State UCLA game. I think UCLA lost 14-7 to Utah, and everyone kind of forgot about UCLA, but I think UCLA is actually going to look pretty good in that game against Washington State. I wanted to also mention, where is it? Fresno State at Wyoming, because Fresno State's 5-0 still. And I don't know if they play anyone that tough the rest of the year. And Wyoming's a pretty good team. I don't want to say like Cinderella story potentially Fresno State, but team to maybe keep an eye on. Remember, Fresno State did beat Purdue already this year.
Did you stay? And if you did, I think we're the only two people to do this. Did you stay up and watch Fresno State versus Nevada?
I watched a lot of it, but I was going back and forth between Fresno State and Nevada and the Big Ten final drive.
Okay. Yeah, I ended up watching that. in the morning with my
I was
grandpa.
hoping
But
Fresno State was going to actually score more points than they did. It was actually kind of a boring game.
yeah, it was very boring. But I was like, all right, no Pac-12 after dark at this point. So Fresno it is. And yeah, I mean, Nevada is not very good, but Fresno looked good.
I thought there was one more team that I wanted to mention, but I'm not really sure if I can think about it anymore. I will say the LSU Missouri game I think is going to be more interesting than people are giving it credit for. Missouri's still perfect right now, so just take that for what you will. It's actually a pretty solid weekend of football for Penn State not playing, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, it's a good slate. It's a good slate. 2 weeks ago it was awesome, but that's kind of how college football is. Some weeks you have no good games, and College Game Day goes to see a team that's probably going to win 5 games play a team that's probably going to win 3 games. So sometimes you have weeks like that. And some weeks you have games where there looks like there's going to be 5 awesome games. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to get out of here.
We're going to have one of those awesome games in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of those. Apparently, another Easter egg for people that are still watching and listening late. There is a rumor out there that the Big Ten schedule is going to be released tomorrow.
Really?
For next year. Yeah.
Is this some Big J journalism, or did you see it somewhere?
I don't know. I just saw it on social media.
Okay. I thought you had a scoop.
No, I don't have a scoop. No scoop this time. But if I'm right, I told you so. If I'm not, don't blame me.
I just thought of something. And I think we talked about it at the beginning of the year. UMass Penn State, the Adam Brenneman Bowl.
Yeah. Yeah, we mentioned that before.
Yeah, I thought we did. Yeah.
There's a lot of things there. You got Don Brown coming back to Beaver Stadium.
Yeah. Used to coach with Franklin.
Yep. Maybe that's it. I know we tweeted Adam Brenneman about it because Adam Brenneman was like, "Oh yeah, I should be commentating that game."
He'd be the most fair man in America to be able to call that one.
Don't know if that's happening or not. I wanted to say one thing. For the people that are complaining about Peacock, at least you're not Purdue. Purdue has had 3 straight games on Peacock for football.
The natives would be really restless with that.
Yeah, that would not be solid. But listen, guys, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for hanging out with us. Please make sure you've liked the video and subscribed on YouTube. I think we're about to hit 2K subs, which is fantastic. If you're listening to the show on podcasts, wherever you're listening, please make sure you've subscribed to that podcast directory and tell your friends about us. That's all I have, Shawn.
Yeah, if you're just in a casual conversation with a pal, just be like, hey, go listen to Cory and Shawn.
Go listen to those 2 schmucks.
Yeah, you're probably smarter than both of those guys.
So. Yeah, we're here to make you feel better. No, in all seriousness, thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
And we will be back Monday for previewing UMass. Again, we will not be live on next Wednesday. For Shawn Kane, I'm Cory Lestochi. You've been listening to Hardcore Penn State Football. Until Monday, have a good bye weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.